stuff I love about modern day football. So, I did a video just like this fairly recently where I talked about what I dislike about modern football, and I said in that video I would do a part 2 about stuff I like about modern football. So here it is. If you haven't checked out the other video, then feel free to watch it after this video. I'll put a link to it in the description. But anyways, here we are. So these are some of the stuff which I love about the current day modern football, and football in 2025 in general. So I've got a couple points here, but I've got no clear script. I'm just gonna sort of ramble about football in 2025 and what I think is very good about it. So you've heard the bad stuff, but now it's time for the good stuff. So let me know the stuff you like about modern football. I really would like to hear your thoughts, because we're all different about what we like and dislike, so I love to hear your thoughts. But anyways, let's get into it. So the first thing which I really like about football in the modern day is availability. Now, this is sort of in two parts really, but it's the first part is the amount of detail you can gather on any player in the world pretty much is incredible. It's incredible. Now I spoke in my other video about sort of stats and how maybe I don't particularly like stats, but it's not that I don't like stats. Actually, this might sound contradictory, but I really like the fact that if there's some random player in, I don't know, the Bundesliga second division, he's a striker, I can go ahead and, even if I've never watched him play, I can get a pretty detailed baseline of how he plays just based on the stats. Like, I could go onto a stat website and I could get pretty detailed information about this random player, and I can sort of judge, okay, this guy's really good at dribbles, or he's really good at passing, or maybe he's a bit of an all-rounder, or maybe he's just not very good at anything. So links to my other video, of course. That should not be the only way I judge the player, but I like the fact that I can get a baseline understanding of pretty much any player in the world by looking at their stats. And I can go into really good detail if I wanted to about any player I want, really, and that's something I find is really interesting. It's something I really enjoy doing personally. You know, when I make like one player every club should sign videos, it really is helpful for me, because you know, I don't watch every single league, every single player in the entire world, right? So having this ability to sort of get a baseline understanding of a player through their stats is fantastic, and it's great. You know, when Chelsea, for example, sign yet another random 16-year-old kid from Brazil, at least I can say, okay, let me go have a look at some of his stats and get an idea of sort of what kind of player he is. And that's something I really do enjoy about modern football, really. The availability of getting to look at the stats of any player pretty much in the world. But it's also a separate part too of availability in terms of being able to watch pretty much any league in the world. I think it's really cool. Obviously, like, you have to pay and stuff, but I'm talking more so like, for example, if I didn't manage to catch a Serie A game, like, I don't know, Torino versus I find it really cool that, I can pretty much go and watch any game in the world um, that is recorded, right? And most games in the world are now recorded. I can go on like Twitter, and on my timeline I might see like a crazy goal someone scored in the Brazilian second division or something, and it's really nice, the availability of being able to watch all of these games, all of these different leagues, is something I really enjoy doing, because previously growing up, obviously you could do this stuff, but I feel like it wasn't maybe as accessible as now. And I find myself now watching a lot of other leagues, like for example Serie A is one of my favourite leagues to watch actually, in the world, because I get to watch a lot of it because on TV I can see highlights of it and stuff, whereas maybe growing up I barely watched any Serie A, to be honest, because maybe it was a couple games on YouTube for like Juventus, but that was really about it. And same thing for like the Bundesliga, like for example, some games are free to watch on YouTube, some at some points in the UK by Sky, and it's really fun. I find myself sometimes just watching random Bundesliga games because of that, and yeah, that availability is something I really do like. Although having to pay extortionate fees for subscriptions is pretty annoying, but anyways. Next up, this is probably the thing I love the most about football, the modern day in 2025, and it's actually the sort of new age youngsters in football right now, and the individualism they play with. Now, I feel like we sort of went through a phase, maybe between like 2019 to about 2023, where, the term system player was coined because it was also heavily focused about the system, the tactics, the philosophy, playing like Pep. Everyone was obsessed with it, and you saw players sort of almost become robotic in a way, right? However, I love that we have sort of moved past that now with this young crop of players that have come through. And I mean, if I think about some of my favourite players in the world, they're all pretty much youngsters, right? And they play with such freedom, and it's almost a throwback in a way. It's sort of like football is reverting back to maybe like the mid 2000s, right? Where players would sort of just get the ball and say, you know what, I'm just gonna try something. I'm gonna try do something. I'm gonna try and take on my man. I'm gonna try a risky pass. I'm gonna try create something which maybe, we might lose a ball from, but I'm gonna try it, and I don't care if it doesn't work. I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm thinking of players like Pedri, Musiala, Vinicius Jr., Yamal, Desiree Doué, Jeremy Doku, Rafa Leao, Kavicha, Nico Williams, Palmer, Vinny. I mean, I could go on and on. Even like defenders like Kabasi, and I'll even throw in someone like Murillo, where instead of just constantly always passing the ball out the back, playing a safe pass, playing side to side, the guy sometimes just says, you know what, I'm going to get the ball, and I'm going to try dribble past my striker, I'm going to try dribble into the midfield with the ball. I don't care if it's risky, and there's a decent chance I might actually lose the ball, but I'm going to try it, because, why not? And that is something which I love and admire about this sort of young crop of players, where they're just willing to try stuff, they're willing to take risks, they're willing to dribble past players, they're willing to make really risky passes, and they play with such freedom, and of course they play within tactics and systems, and I think we've sort of got the perfect blend now, where themselves and do something in the final third, do something different in the midfield, do something different at the back. And I think it's just really entertaining. You know, I find myself a lot of the times, especially like I watch like Champions League games or something, there's so many times where I'm just like, whoa. I'm like, whoa, no way he's just done that. I'm like, oh my days, how has he scored that? Or, oh my days, what a pass, what a skill. Like, because I just love the freedom and individuality these players are playing with now. And yeah, it's so entertaining and fun to watch, and I really do hope it continues. The next thing which I really do like about modern day football is the competitiveness. Now, for me, I feel like these sort of lower, worse teams have drastically improved in football. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about like relegation sides, like obviously, you know, in the Prem back-to-back seasons, all three promoted sides have been relegated. Like, there's a clear gap between those guys. But I'm more so talking about, you know, teams like Wolves and West Ham. I'm talking about those teams who are down at the bottom ends of the table, yet they have people like Cunha and Jared Bowen, who are fantastic players. I'm thinking of teams like Brighton and Bournemouth and Forest, who are, you know, competing for European spots. Fulham's. And, you know, 15, 20 years ago, that simply wasn't the case. Not many of those sides would ever really qualify for Europe. That's where the, you know, Big Six term was coined, because it was just pretty much the Big Six sides who would qualify and finish in the top six almost every single season. You would have some here and there who would get in, but, you know, I remember growing up, I don't really remember a time besides like Leicester winning the league when a sort of team outside of the Big Six even qualified for the Champions League. Now it feels like every season it's happening. You know, we had Newcastle, we had Villa this season in the Champions League, and it's not just the Prem, it's all the other leagues as well. You know, again, think of the Champions League this season, we had Aston Villa in there, we had Brest in there, who, you know, pulled off some great results. You know, we had Bologna in there, we had Stuttgart in there, we had Girona in there. You know, last season we had Girona competing for a large portion for a La Liga title. We had Leverkusen winning the league last season, with Atalanta winning a European trophy last season. So it feels like all across Europe we're now starting to see the competitiveness of these sort of mid-table, mid-teams really rise, and it's really good to see. Because, yeah, I think all across Europe we're seeing now teams breaking into these European spots, and I think it's a lot because, you know, footballers, coaching has definitely advanced, so I think we've got a lot more good coaches and very young coaches as well, and they're sort of scattered across these teams. You know, for example, like Bournemouth have Iraola, and, you know, Villa have Unai Emery, and there's all sorts of young, great coaches. Girona last season had Michel, who did a fantastic job. Xabi Alonso at Leverkusen, right? And it's really good to see. It's really good to see, you know, these fresh teams come in. It's really good to see these spots be competitive, not the same teams over and over getting into European spots. It's really good to see, you know, that teams like Real Madrid will lose games to mid-table La Liga sides now. Back in the day, that barely ever really happens. I will say the gap between those top teams and like the bottom teams, I think, has increased, which is a bit of a worry. Like we're sort of seeing now more than ever in all leagues across Europe. Like there's always one team at the bottom of the table who is just completely done, like halfway through the season and already relegated. You know, like Southampton this this season, Sheffield last season. You had Monza this year in Serie A. We have Valladolid this season in Spain. That's something which is a bit of a problem. But I think overall the competitiveness in terms of those mid to top half teams has drastically improved, and they are now able to actually start to compete with some of the big boys, finish above some big clubs and compete with them, some of them for European spots and even major trophies, which is fantastic to see. And even that stretch to the international stage as well, right? Like at the last World Cup we have Morocco making a semi-finals, right? Croatia making another semi-finals at that World Cup, beating Brazil, for example. Japan have been doing really well at recent World Cups. The last Euros, for example, teams like Austria did amazing in the group stage, beating the likes of Netherlands and France in their group. And yeah, I think overall football sort of base level has improved, the coaching has drastically improved, and we're now seeing sort of smaller sides being able to compete with bigger teams, and it's great to see. Right, and the final thing which I like about modern football in 2025, this one is sort of like, it's very different to the others, and it's not as big a point, but it's just a sort of little thing which I do enjoy, is the social media chat between players and the sort of trolling that goes on. I love a little bit of trolling between players, and something that obviously social media has had some bad stuff, consequences in terms of football and abuse and stuff, but one thing I do like about modern football is players are now able to express themselves on social media, and you know, we always get these sort of same old PR-y interviews, whereas now we still get those, but now we then get, like, on social media, players like responding to stuff and responding to comments, writing tweets and posts. Like, it's so funny, you know, players like Neil Mopay, for example, and like his social media posts with like Madison and McTominay and stuff. It's really fun, it's really cool to see, you know, players like Rabiot and Yamal. I know that maybe wasn't social media, but it feels like we're sort of starting to see players now, like, on social media go a little bit back and forth. I like the fact that, you know, sometimes players like post on social media some stuff when like cryptic messages and stuff. It's pretty fun, it's pretty cool to see. Yeah, that's just a sort of mute point, but it's a little point I like personally, the sort of trolling between players and players, you know, commenting on posts and stuff and making little sly jokes and stuff on social media. I think it's pretty fun, but overall the main things which I really love about modern football are the availability, about being able to watch pretty much any game and any player in the world and get stats about any player, any team in the world. I love the sort of young, new, up-and-coming players who play with such individuality and freedom and creativity, and I really love the competitiveness of the sort of top half mid-table sides across the world in Europe, which I think has drastically increased, and we're seeing not the same old teams in the Champions League, not the same old teams winning competitions, winning cup competitions. It's starting to shift, and it's different teams, and it's really nice to see. But yeah, there we go. Those were some of the stuff which I like about modern football. As I said at the start of the video, please let me know what you like about modern football. I really would like to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with the stuff I said or disagree? Let me know. And if you guys have enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, consider subscribing, and